I have the honor of hosting two exceptional experts who are at the forefront of merging healthcare and artificial intelligence, paving the way for transformative advancements in our field. Let's begin by extending a warm welcome to our first speaker, Mr. Ankit Agarwal. Mr. Ankit is a generative AI, data science, and analytics thought leader, championing objective and data driven decision making with 20 years of experience. He's passionate about propagating the use of AI to bring about numerous positive changes in society, including enhanced productivity, improved healthcare, and increased access to education. Welcome, Mr. Ankit. And now let's welcome our distinguished speaker, Dr. Amit Kumar, a physician and a diabetologist. Dr. Amit not only is an expert in his field, but he's also a visionary AI entrepreneur committed to revolutionizing healthcare through innovation. Welcome, Dr. Amit. So, without any further ado, let's dive into the discussion on generative AI in healthcare. And audience, if you have any questions during the session, please don't hesitate to drop them in the comment section below. Now I pass the baton to Dr. Amit for their enlightening talk on this fascinating subject.
Thank you very much, Harshita, once again for the kind introduction. A warm welcome to all our viewers. This is the third episode of the podcast series of Med AI, Decoding AI in Healthcare. And it's a pleasure to have with me Mr. Ankit from USA. And Ankit is a generative AI expert. So, dear viewers, in the beginning of this podcast series, we had kind of had a process of kind of exploring each avenues of artificial intelligence in each of our episodes. So today we have with us Ankit. Ankit is a generative AI expert. And over the next 30 to 40 minutes, we will hear from him. He's going to be the expert today telling us about how we can leverage the use of generative AI into healthcare and into clinical practice. Ankit, a warm welcome to you.
Thank you.
So, without wasting much time, Ankit, I'm going to kind of straight away dive into some of the questions that that comes in the mind of most clinicians, most doctors who are curious, who are inquisitive about artificial intelligence, exploring them into their field and practice. Over the last 4 to 6 months, we've all been kind of absorbing in this huge hype about a terminology called generative artificial intelligence. So, as an expert, love to hear from you. What exactly is generative AI and why such a big hype about this technology?
Yeah, absolutely. So, generative AI technology is certainly beautiful in aspect that it can work equally well on textual data. It can work well on images, videos, uh, etc. Code that software developers use, etc. So what is generative AI? So essentially, generative AI is that branch of data science which has emanated from advancements in machine learning. So what has happened over the period of time, we had artificial intelligence, then we had machine learning, which is part of AI. Then we further developed deep learning, which is wherein we used multiple layers of complex neural networks to improve the accuracy and sophistication of machine learning. Then further down the line, we moved and we came up with the concept of generative AI, where not only are we able to assess the data that we were doing using machine learning and analyze and predict, but with generative AI, you can generate noise content, which can be in form of text, which can be in form of images, which can be in form of code, etc. And how is it made? How it is made possible is we used some of the largest amount of data that is available on web. For example, think about taking the entire Wikipedia, and then you take up a model, a machine learning model, and then you feed the entire data into that model so that the model starts understanding the language, the semantics, the context, etc., and it's able to generate new content. So that's what generative AI is. So it can generate new content as opposed to AI earlier, which was able to understand the content and answer questions through predictions.
I mean, that is fantastic. And understanding from from the basics that you've just shared with us, we kind of derive this understanding that machine learning is kind of a subset of AI and deep learning is a subset of machine learning. And then when you kind of go deeper into deep learning, on one spectrum you have generative AI, and the other spectrum you have the large language models. So give us an idea at the moment, Ankit. I mean, there's been so much of use of generative AI and the large language models, and you can be the best person to tell us how together these two things goes, in terms of application. So what are the current state of the adoption of these generative AI in healthcare and life sciences, and also parallelly encompassing the various LLMs which are there that is getting that get developed, across the globe.
Yeah. So, firstly, let me talk about generative AI and LLM to make sure that I demystify it for the attendees. So, large language model refers to a model, a machine learning model that has been fed with very large amount of data, which can be text, which can be images, which can be uh, code like C, C++, Java, Python code, etc. So that is called a large language model. It has been trained with that large amount of data over the period of several hours, several days, several weeks, sometimes several months on very powerful GPU machines, graphical processing unit machines. And that's make a large language model. For example, when you say Chat GPT. So Chat GPT is a large language model developed by OpenAI. Then you have Palm. Palm is another large language model developed by OpenAI. Now, generative AI refers to the science of leveraging these large language models to generate content like text, image, etc. So that's how these two are connected together. Now, coming to your next question as to what are some of the large language models that exist in the world and are being used a lot. So as we talk, each minute, there are companies which are working on building new large language model. But some of the prominent ones are, so I broadly classify them into two categories. One is open source, one is proprietary models. So proprietary models are models like ChatGPT by OpenAI, like Palm 2 by Google. Now, the beauty is Google has developed a customized model for medical professionals, which they call MedTech Palm 2. So that is specifically on the healthcare side. Then there are other very powerful models like Titan by AWS. Amazon has developed their own proprietary model called Titan. Then Claude model by Anthropic. So I can go on and on. So these are some of the proprietary models. Then open source models are also very powerful, like Falcon model. Then uh, there are a few others. I can't recall the name. I'm sorry, but Falcon has been very powerful model based on in the recent studies. So there are many open source models like Hugging Face, BERT model, Roberta model, etc., which are available for use. But yes, these are the models available. And when it comes to healthcare adoption, so I see adoption of generative AI in every category of healthcare and life sciences. For example, we see adoption of generative AI in pharmaceutical domain, which may be related to drug discovery and design, clinical trial processing, or maybe precision medicine therapies. I also see it in the medtech industry a lot, like in the generative product design, like prosthetics design, etc., or diagnostic image enhancements, etc. Then providers, doctors, etc., also leveraging generative AI, like for patient screening, automated document processing, a very common use case, and I can talk about it later in detail. In medical image recognition, a very common use case where AI was used already, and now Gen AI is also playing a role by generating a lot of synthetic images in order to improve AI models. We are also seeing adoption in the payer space, like preventive healthcare through predictive models or automation of claim processing. And also, it's being used by public health agencies in US, UK, and other countries for public health surveillance, or say, for example, resource allocation and utilization for doing the surveys, etc., and then generating the reports for the government agencies, so on and so forth. So I'll pause there to see if I have answered your question, Amit.
Yes, you have, and that kind of opens a lot of space to explore generative AI into healthcare. And I'm sure over the next 3 to 5 years, we'll really see these kind of tools and models kind of bring a huge paradigm shift in the way healthcare is looked at, from all aspect. I mean, that's why we feel that AI is here to revolutionize healthcare in the most positive way possible. Now, when you talk about, you just spoke about the various large language models, the open source ones. I think the one that we all can familiarize with, the ones who are the non-tech, the ones users of AI, is Chat GPT. And we see that, I mean, most of us have been using Chat GPT for over 3, 4, 5 months now. And this one thing that we have realized is that you need to give a smart input into the Chat GPT foundation model to get the desired output. And in the technical term, it's called prompting. So, Ankit, we'd like to learn from you what exactly is prompting, prompt engineering, prompt design. If you can demystify those, for our viewers. And then again, a very important question that, all medical professionals would like to ask here is that, is it really necessary for a doctor or a healthcare professional to really learn the technicalities of prompting or prompt engineering for using a generative AI foundation model effectively?
Yeah, so prompting is a technique, or engineering is a technique where you essentially guide your large language model to generate response in a specific manner. So you are tuning it to answer in a specific manner. So I usually say in layman terms that what you ask is what you get. That's what prompt engineering or prompting defines. So the way you ask a questions, the model is going to answer in a similar manner. Now, if you can improvise on your question, then the model can also improvise on its response. There are various ways you people use prompt engineering. So there are various techniques, like some people use normal prompting. You ask a question, the model generates an answer. Some professionals, they use it to behave like a persona. Like you can say, all right, you are a diabetologist, and so you tell the model that, okay, you are a diabetologist, so why don't you start providing me some of the recommendations that can be used in a preventive manner to reduce the chances of diabetes. And the model will start answering and behaving like a doctor. Then there is also something called chain of thought reasoning, wherein you ask the model a question. So you provide a context first, that there is a disease going on in the specific area. Then you ask a specific questions. Then you provide the response yourself to the model, and then you provide a reasoning as well why you provided that response. So if you provide some such examples, you are doing prompt engineering for the model. And when later on, if a user asks the question to the model, then the user will receive a response as well as the reasoning behind that response. So there are various ways you can do that. Now, is it necessary for doctors to be good in prompting? Depends. Depends on how you use generative AI. So, for example, if you are using, so a very common use case of generative AI is like automating processing such as documentation, claims handling, pre-authorization, patient onboarding, scheduling, etc. There are tools, companies out there that are doing it. Like if I am having a conversation as a patient with a diabetologist like Dr. Amit, and I provide my issue details, etc., thus what kind of suffering I'm having, and Dr. Amit tells about the recommendation and the next action for me. There is a generative AI model, which is so there is an AI model which is first converting the voice conversation into transcription. Then there is a Gen AI model, which is capturing summary and notes from that conversation. Now, in this case, we don't have to be good in prompting because the product or the solution itself is generating the summary, the action items, etc., based on the conversation. So if doctors use it as a product, they don't need to be good in prompt engineering. But if they use it as a chatbot, probably sometimes they might want to use some better prompts to get the right response.
So one thing is quite clear, Ankit, here is that if a doctor or a healthcare provider wants to leverage the use of the AI tools, they need to have at least a very basic idea of what exactly it does and how it does. I think that is something that every healthcare provider must kind of understand. I mean, if not kind of get completely familiar with a prompt engineering, but at least know that how they can prompt and what are the benefits of giving a right prompt to get the right output, because eventually you will be using those outputs to make better clinical decisions. And as clinicians, our viewpoint is that when we are using any model, any LLM model or a generative AI foundation model, kind of in the clinical decision support system, we want that to be a wiser version of ourselves, supporting the thought process that it goes through, that I would go through. So in a way, as a doctor or as a clinician, I should really know how to get the best out of that particular model. So one question, that all doctors, keep asking me also, whenever I advocate the use of AI, that where does one start from in AI literacy? I mean, do you really need to learn the advances of data science? Do you need to be a coder? Or where do you start from, and what basics do you really need to know so that you can leverage the use of these Gen AI tools in clinical practice? Ankit?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So there are various ways to start. So, for example, the first would be certainly to get acquainted with the basics of artificial intelligence. That's very important. For example, when if you are a medical professional who deals with lot of imaging, etc., then you must know that how does visual AI work? How does the vision part of it works? How does the image diagnosis, image analysis works for AI? If you are a doctor who usually interacts with the patients, then you would be it would be good for you to understand how exactly AI can help you or supplement in your diagnosis and in the conversation with the patient. If you are a telehealth doctor, you need to understand how exactly this teleconversation works, how exactly chat transcription works, etc. So I think to have a basic understanding of AI is good. Then, in addition to that, the other thing that the doctors can do or medical professionals can do is they can identify specific generative AI tools that are relevant to the clinical practice. For example, there are generative AI tools which are available for healthcare applications such as medical image analysis, clinical decision support, drug discovery, personalized medicines. So doctors can start leveraging some of those Gen AI tools and understand what works best for them and what does not. Then they can also a good way is to start small and evaluate. So they can begin by implementing a simple AI or generative AI tool and monitor its performance in their clinic or in their group in the hospital, and then take a judgmental call whether it works or not and replace it with another tool. But more importantly, it is also important for medical professionals to understand the risks, limitations, and challenges around the use of generative AI. And it's important that it is not there to replace medical professionals, but it is there to supplement them, to support them in their effort to improve the healthcare. And then they should also know that there is human review always required to ensure best use of the technology. Uh, Also, I always advocate about the understanding of ethical and regulatory considerations for medical professionals. That's important for everybody to understand ethical considerations. The reason is they differ by region to region. For example, in US, we have regulation like HIPAA, or in Europe, there are regulations like GDPR. Similarly, in Asia Pacific, also there are different regulations. So it's important based on where you are to understand the regulatory and considerations in that region. And then lastly, my suggestion would be a good way to start is to collaborate with the AI expert. For example, like this initiative by MedSynapse. Professionals can join a community of practice, and then they can start collaborating with AI experts so that AI experts will help in doing what they do well, and doctors can do what they do best. And together, if we combine our knowledge, then certainly we can embrace this new technology to do something good for the humankind.
Absolutely. And I think you said very strong words over there, that collaboration is the way forward. Learning is the way forward. Being curious as a doctor to learn how to use the AI tools is going to be the first step. Something that I really feel that you need to be curious to learn about these tools. And then, yes, you need to collaborate. And most importantly, two very important things that Ankit said is that AI would definitely not be replacing us, but kind of supplementing our actions and our decision making capabilities. So we must use it ethically and, more importantly, responsibly. So that is very important. But then again, you also spoke about, Ankit, about the limitations and some of the risks involved. So we must also understand, like all technologies has its limitation. We must understand, appreciate, and then make the best use of the technology, knowing the limitations. So, if I talk about one such limitations, that some of us have experienced while prompting on a foundation model like the GPT, is something called AI hallucination. So what exactly happens? What is AI hallucination? Why does that happen? Can you give us an explanation, and how can one avoid this?
Yeah, great question. So essentially, as I said in the beginning, these models have been trained on very, very large amount of data. And sometimes what happen, these models get confused. So when the models are not, if the data that is used to train the model is not sufficiently large or diverse, the model sometimes is not able to generalize to new situation and may start to generate hallucination. So it's like generating weird responses to the questions that you may have asked, because it has never came across the data to provide it its a response to the specific questions asked. So if you ask a question which is not related to the data it was used to train the model on, it will start generating very weird responses. So that is called hallucination. So it can happen due to a very strange question. It can happen due to a very complex prompt, or it can happen because of repeated prompts that you ask the model, but always changing it in different manner. So there are various ways, various reasons for hallucination. Now, importantly, how exactly you can reduce it? So there are various ways it can be reduced. Firstly, uh, one thing that model providers are doing, like some of the proprietary models which I mentioned in the beginning, they are creating a layer on top of their models to reduce these hallucinations. So that is something that they are doing at their end. But as a user, what we can do is we can be more clear and specific in the prompt that we use to ask the question. Secondly, we should be using a model that has been used that has been trained on sufficiently large amount of data to reduce the chances of hallucination. And then we can fine tune the model. For example, if you want to use a model that is specific to clinicians, then you can pick up a very large language model. You can fine tune it based on some of the medical data, and then it can start reduce. It will reduce hallucinations. And lastly, there is a technique called RAG, retrieval augmented generation, where model generates response based on the specific documents or data provided to the model. So that is another way to reduce hallucinations.
Fantastic. That is some very good technical inputs you have given us today. And the next time I give a prompt to Chat GPT, I'll be very careful about, so that I don't get into the trap of hallucinating, the model, so that I don't get, unwanted kind of a output. But again, that gives a very clear understanding to a couple of things. In that, the data that is going in has to be quality data, and a large set of data needs to go in before you can start utilizing it in the clinical practice. And so a very good understanding is very much important for all clinicians. As a doctor, I really feel, if I want a particular model to function on my data set, then I would really should have it tailor made on my data set, so that I can get the exact kind of an output that I would desire, so that without the limitations, without the hallucinations going in. But still, then there would be a lot of risks involved. Ethical risks, biases will be coming in. So, give us an idea, Ankit. Like, what are the risks and considerations which are important, for adopting generative AI? I mean, start from the word go. It's all the wow factor. We are all fascinated by it, but we should always be knowing, the limitations that it brings on, and also some of the ethical considerations. And what are these risks, and how do you suggest we can mitigate these risks in our day to day practice?
Yeah. So one of the biggest risk is misuse or over reliance on AI or generative AI models. So I always advocate that the AI generated insights are recommendations rather than mandates, and they should go through human review. So that is one risk that everybody who's using AI or generative AI should know, that AI models could generate incorrect or not so correct responses, and they need to be reviewed specifically in the area of healthcare and life sciences. Second is the bias. So bias is inherent in the models based on the data that was used to train the model. So if the data is biased, the model will be biased. It's like, if you're using a low quality fuel in your car will perform accordingly. So it applies the same for data as well that you use. Then the patient privacy. So patient privacy is of utmost important, I understand, for the medical professional. So that is another important aspect that we need to make sure that the health data is sensitive and it should be handled with extreme care. So companies with generative AI solutions should clarify data ownership with partners, the strengths of what kind of cybersecurity they have, and uh, look at they should look to make sure that the data is encrypted. There is a data privacy when it comes to using the model. If you are using the model, whatever data you're using to fine tune or train the model is not going to the model provider, like what we saw earlier when ChatGPT was initially announced. And lastly, transparency or explainability. So, as a doctor or as a medical professional, if you want to use a model, certainly the curiosity comes in mind. Okay, uh, the model, by looking at the image of a CT scan of a brain, is able to detect the stroke. All right, that's fine. But why is it doing that? How is it doing that? So that kind of explainability and transparency should be available in the models. So we need to make our models more explainable, so that you are not just predicting based on the output generated by model, but you are also having a reason why you are predicting that.
Certainly, certainly. Going ahead, I think if I look back the way artificial intelligence has kind of introduced itself and evolved into healthcare, before generative AI tools came into existence, we had a lot of machine learning and deep learning being used through these pattern recognition algorithm, which you just spoke about, in the field of radiology, somewhere also in the field of dermatology. I would feel we have used it in the field of screening diabetic retinopathy in our patients. And now we understand that these generative AI can kind of give us superimposed synthetic images and increase the sensitivity and the specificity of those machine learning algorithms that we have already used. So that is there. That is something that doctors have kind of, or most of us have kind of seen and experienced it. But what everybody is fascinated is that, can a generative AI tool bring a change in my clinical decision support system? In a way, can it help me understand the differential, give me a provisional diagnosis, and tell me if I'm missing anything, if I'm overdoing anything, if I'm underdoing anything, and guide me to be a better doctor? I think that is something that most doctors are looking forward to and leveraging with the use of AI. So, as a generative AI expert, Ankit, what is your vision about this being done using the Gen AI tools, perhaps in the next 3 to 4 years?
Yeah. So there are applications that are out there in order to improve the accuracy of decisioning, and it's not only in the diagnosis but in the surgery world as well. So, for example, there is a company. What they do is they have built a software to help or to assist surgeons with ablation surgeries on kidneys or livers for tumor treatment, where AI helps surgeons to visualize patients' anatomy in 3D. And that's where Gen AI comes into picture, because it uses advanced imaging technology to precisely target the affected tissue. I think since ablation is more around accuracy or precisioning of identifying the target, that's where generative AI is being used in order to identify accurately where exactly to puncture the tumor. So that is just a simple one example, but there are a lot of other examples where, like, there is a company which is which have got FDA approval as well in the US, Page.ai. So it's a digital pathology company, and what they are doing, they are integrating Gen AI into product to improve accuracy and efficiency of prostate cancer detection.
Right.
So so those are some of the ways like Gen AI is being used in terms of improving the diagnosis, improving the surgery precision, etc. And I think in the years to come, uh, as our companies, the technical companies or companies which are developing these solutions are finding a way to make it very seamless for the doctors so that they don't have to differentiate between AI and Gen AI. They only see it as a single box of technology through AI powered, which will have combination of AI and generative AI to empower them to do their job more accurately.
Very true. Very true. And we as doctors have always felt that the evolution of healthcare has been from more guideline centric into a patient centric approach. We follow evidence based medicine, and that's why we are searching for evidence based AI tools. And we want it to be more patient centric. So, what better than a generative AI tool which can help you achieve more precision care, more individualized care, customized and tailor made for your subset of patients in your area of clinical practice? I think that is really something that will really revolutionize the way we practice and perceive medicine. And I think that is going to be one big revolution coming in the field of healthcare, probably in this decade, going ahead. But when you say that, at the back of our mind, doctor would think, healthcare professionals would think, so if I have a smarter version of me giving me guidance on my clinical decision support, well, it may not replace me. It may be a good supplement, but then can it replace the repetitive tasks that I'm doing? Because even in medicine, although every individual is different and every patient is taken in a very individualized way, no two individual can be same in terms of their diagnosis and clinical perception and therapeutic treatment decision. We still see that a larger part of physician burnout is because of repetitive tasks in clinical practice. And I think there has already been this apprehension in the other fields, that people feel that a larger part of the repetitive task might be taken up by the LLMs incorporated with the Gen AI tools. Do you see the same happening in healthcare as well? What is your vision of that?
Yes, I do see that a lot. In fact, there is a large application of generative AI to help medical fraternity in the administrative front in order to reduce the repeated tasks. For example, automating processing like pre-authorization, patient onboarding, scheduling, and more importantly, the time a doctor or medical professional spend in capturing notes, etc., and then identifying issue, highlighting the main parts of that conversation, capturing that in their Epic system or whichever software they use. I think that takes up a lot of time of the medical professionals. So through generative AI, so there are products out there by companies like AppBridge, by DeepScribe. There are many other companies. What they do, these solutions help these medical professionals to reduce that repeated activity, that time-consuming activity, or the heavy lifting part. And based on some of the surveys we have done, we have also heard that it can save up to 3 hours each day for some of the medical professionals, clinicians, by taking care of these administrative tasks. Think about it like, for example, when a nurse shift change in hospitals, right? They have to prepare handover the documents or handover notes, etc. Those can easily be automated through generative AI, based on all the conversations a clinician has with a nurse. All that is summarized and captured, and the nurse, before they have to do the shift change, they can quickly review those notes, make any changes, and that's it. So it can save so many of those hours. It can also help in accuracy, because sometimes as a human being you may tend to forget what happened in the last 8 hours during your shift. You may not capture everything, but if you are depending on an automated AI, it is able to capture everything. So that way, there are ways through which administrative activities can be shortened, and it can help save time for the medical profession, so that as a doctor, you can focus on more important aspects during the conversations with the patients rather than capturing notes.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's one thing that I'm personally looking very much forward to. We can have a Gen AI kind of tool. I think a lot of people are already making it, and some are already experimenting it, where the patient's verbal history can be converted from speech to text, and that comes down in my electronic hospital record or electronic medical records as part of my clinical summary. I mean, imagine the potential of that reducing your workload burden, wherein actually as a doctor I can give more time uh, in actually understanding what the patient needs, individualizing the care, and bringing in that big word called empathy into our clinical practice, because that really takes away, the burden of the workload. The burnout really takes away empathy from our practice sometimes, and that is absolutely necessary. So we can really see going hand in hand with these AI tools, with these fascinating generative AI tools, to reduce this burden and kind of help us increase more empathy and more precision into our practice. Once again, Ankit, you've given us fantastic inputs today. I mean, especially with the application tools that you have spoken about and your vision as to how you see these tools really work out. You've made it very clear to us that as doctors, as clinicians, we should really start understanding a bit about prompting and using these AI models, leveraging it, I mean, for our own good. And definitely it's not going to be replacing us, but it's going to be a fantastic supplement tool. So I think those are the points that I will take away from the discussion with you today, and we're almost at the end for our podcast. So I would like to have Harshita back, and I'm sure after this exciting discussion, Harshita would have some questions from our viewers and our audience. So Harshita, over to you for some questions for Ankit.
Yeah, we'll take one question. So, generative AI can assist in drug discovery and development. So, is there any successful cases where AI has significantly accelerated the drug development process? And are there any differences in the effectiveness of these efforts between countries with varying research ecosystems?
Yeah, so great question. So when it comes to having the success, we do not yet have an example where the drug's discovery has been, where the drug has already been discovered and out there for use. But there are companies, very large companies, which are leveraging generative AI for drug discovery process. And what they do is they are leveraging generative AI for creating a lot of data in terms of patient data, for example, or simulated data. So there are two ways they are using. One is for things like protein synthesis, etc. So they are synthesizing those instances through which your drug can be improved, and molecular design pattern, etc. The other is in the clinical trial part for drug discovery process, wherein through generative AI you can create a lot of synthetic data to see what will be the efficacy of that medicine once is developed at different variety of different type of patients, etc. So I think combining these two is being leveraged for drug discovery process. And when it comes to varying exposure globally, yes, it is different because there are strict regulations in countries like US, when in regions like UK, because of government regulations, etc., due to the sensitivity of the patient data, etc. So we will see different evolution of these processes in different countries depending on the regulations that are in those countries. But based on my understanding and what I'm seeing, almost all countries are currently experimenting with the generative AI for drug discovery process.
Yes, I completely agree with what Ankit just said, and I'll just add a few more points to that. I mean, uh, the way a drug discovery or a medical research, kind of progresses is by the term it has in itself is trial and error. And I think generative AI is going to kind of, if it's used in the right way and in the right format, it's going to kind of fast forward a lot of these processes. So yes, drug discovery is going to become much quicker. It will also depend largely upon the data inputs, which he was just referring to, that we give, and the kind of the outputs that we are kind of explorating out of the models, but the process is definitely going to get faster. I'll give you an example. We can really see the generative AI tools being used beautifully when we want to kind of summarize a huge source of medical literature. I mean, you can just have, a huge source of medical literature fed into a particular LLM, and you can kind of get a summary output coming out of it, and it kind of fast forwards of that process of kind of reviewing of the literature that we normally do, which kind of derives all the evidences that we use in our clinical practice. So you talk about the guidelines that is going to come up, you talk about the real world evidences that we're going to do, the clinical trials that we're going to do, and of course drug discovery and protein folding and unfolding, like Ankit has said, has already been explored by some of them. And maybe in some of the episodes ahead of us, we're going to kind of take each of these and we're going to kind of explore how the developments are happening in each of these avenues. But it's definitely exciting days ahead of us, Ankit. And I will again kind of reiterate what you said in the beginning, that we can leverage the best use of AI by collaborating. A collaboration between a medical professional, a doctor, and a data scientist will be the best way out, to kind of get the best output of these LLMs and generative AI foundation models. So I think that brings us to the end of this podcast. But before we end, and I hand it over back to Harshita, one quick take home message from you, Ankit, for our viewers, our audiences, our healthcare professionals. You're mute, Ankit.
Sorry about that. So my takeaway message would be, or my message to my healthcare fraternity would be that Gen AI is certainly not going to replace clinicians and their thought process, but it's going to rather supplement and support them, enabling them to work more efficiently and effectively. And that's how we should look at AI and Gen AI. So it comes with risks and challenges, but the benefits do outweigh the risk, challenges, etc., that come with technology, and that's why there is no reason to shy away or hesitate from adopting it. Rather, we need to look at it as something like an assistant that is there out there to help us, and for new possibilities, which is available at the fingertips of the professionals. And I would say that a medical professional should be willing to embrace those technological advancements to improve patient care overall.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Ankit, for joining us today. It's had been a pleasure having you and taking out your precious time and sharing your valuable expert inputs on generative AI. And I think it would be a big help to our medical fraternity learning from today's podcast and kind of making up their mind on adopting artificial intelligence in the days to come, in the exciting days ahead, which lies ahead of us. So back to you, Harshita.
Yeah. So thank you, Dr. Amit and Mr. Ankit, for this engaging conversation and illuminating insights into the world of generative AI in healthcare. Your expertise has shed light on the immense potential this technology holds for the future of medicine. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you. Yeah, as we wrap up this truly remarkable session, a huge thank you to everyone for tuning in. We'll be back again on 2nd October with next episode on the same topic with more insights and information.